Welcome, Wargamers, back to another week in the Prime Dominion as we come close to the finish line in this exciting narrative campaign. Now, really fast, if this is your first video and you're watching this series, understand that this is a bit different from my usual fare here on the channel. Animosity is a worldwide fan-run campaign or narrative event where players all over the world participate and work together to tell a story of a region in peril devastated by civil war. Now, if you want to get caught up on the whole story, I left the playlist for this campaign in the description down below. Start there and catch back up because there's just so much information and events to build upon that I have to assume you've already seen them. Otherwise, I would go insane with references to the past. Now, this week for our, Animosity coverage, things are a bit different than the others. If you remember all these other videos, I've been doing every faction has like 2 story arcs that they can contribute to, and I would just kind of link them together, and that way I would cover everybody's stories. But last week, we had a bit of a cliffhanger. Mithridates Alti, the vampire lord who's been conspiring in the background this entire campaign, has made his final play for the Prime Dominion. Along with a resurrected Vashti, the two raised a long-buried castle from the earth of Wirinth to the south, and this is a mighty floating fortress known as Castle Iskar. And it kind of drifted lazily in the sky across the Prime Dominion, these massive chains dragging behind it that are tearing these deep fissures in the soil, and it ultimately came to rest over the capital city of Iskarion, blocking the main realm gate leading in or out of the Prime Dominion and interrupting the winter ball where all the satrapies were in attendance. There was panic, destruction, war. Castle Iskar revealed a wall of artillery that pounded away at the literal and symbolic capital of the Prime Dominion. Undead soldiers climbed down its chains and poured into the streets. There were looters and madmen and rogues, only making the situation worse, and each satrap had to react and formulate a plan in minutes. So basically, to kind of put that into like the game format, if you will, instead of each satrapy having 2 narrative leads and stringing them together, this week it's all coalitions versus Castle Iskar with 3 tales of battle between the various factions within the chaos that this invasion created. And what I mean for that second part is essentially when Castle Iskar unleashed its full attack, each satrapy ran towards an artifact that they believed could not be left behind or left to the undead to take. Basically, grab the important stuff and let's get the heck out of here was everyone's mentality. But we're still in a civil war, and so conflict can still happen when 2 satraps go for the same item. So we have 3 stories of satraps basically converging on an item, and then there is how each of them reacted to Castle Iskar individually. The first item is known as the Oriflamme. This is an object that was sought after by both the Arinar and the Ruino. Now, the Oriflamme is a legendary banner under which all of the Iskarneth marched as refugees from the Spirefall, and it gave them a lot of hope. This is essentially when they were marching towards the Prime Dominion as a whole bunch of refugees, this is the banner that led them here as a people. So it's a powerful item for the idea of unity amongst all these different regions. It's been kept deep in the catacombs of the Illuminated Senate of Iskarion, which makes sense. It's like a political thing that would be there with the Senate, and anyone that would take hold of it now would carry instant authority and be able to rally people to their cause. It's a very powerful item. Now, here's where things get a little bit convoluted, okay? Both the Arinar and Ruino immediately see its importance in securing this for like kind of the importance of the people, right? Everybody rushes to the Senate House as destruction's going all over the place, and both coalitions came into the catacombs under the pretext of protecting the banner from looters, okay? And so their diplomats, even though they're at war, they came down and they reached a conclusion, right? We're none of us are here to steal this thing, we're just trying to protect our heritage, which is very important to both of them. And so their diplomats reached an agreement. The Ruino would be allowed to take the flag, in return for some diplomatic concessions to the Arinar. The 2 sides parted on friendly terms, and a small force of Ruino moved down further into the crypt. Again, they're just going to go get the flag. We all understand, put pettiness aside, let's go figure this out. But then things get really, really rough. You see, the R&R intended to betray the Ruilar and advanced in the dead of the night to steal it. They defeated a meager defense of the Ruilar and had the banner in sight, but it was all kind of a ruse because the Ruilar basically expected treachery, and so they created a copy of the banner as a decoy and smuggled the real one out hours before. So this was a Machiavellian thing where everybody's trying to figure the other person out and kind of account for their schemes and backstabbing. Ultimately, the Ruilar, as they originally agreed, left the Senate with the Oriflame banner. The next item of importance is the Phoenix Seal. This is an item that both the Idrilik and the Celandec were both going after. The seal is the symbol of authority for basically the leader of the Iskarneth, right? It's sort of like a badge of office, if you will. And it was also kept in the Senate, basically because the last Seraph was murdered, and so they're kind of just holding on to it in this interim, waiting for a clear victor of the Civil War to kind of come out, and then they would earn the Phoenix Seal. Allowing it to be lost to looters would be the ultimate insult to the legitimacy of the Iskarneth culture, because if anyone can have it, all of a sudden it loses all its meaning. And so whatever satrap carried it would be able to command some authority, like I went in and I took this by force, and people to rally people around them. So the Idrilik and the Celandec both seek to secure the seal and make use of its influence. The seal had been grabbed by Skaven pirates in the confusion of the city's destruction, and a fight broke out in the upper Senate floors between them and the two coalitions. In the aftermath of defeating these thieving rats, the two coalitions agreed to resolve the matter of ownership with a tried and tested solution, a duel. Again, this is how Idrilik solves a lot of their problems. Saint Lothar of the Idrilik would fight Sigmund, the People's Pommel of Celandec, in a fierce fight where the large Stormcast almost crushed the old man. Lothar instead won through experience and guile. No blood was spilled. Again, this is an honor duel. The Idrilik won the right to the Phoenix Seal, and they basically ended very amicably, which is awesome. This is no time to be making enemies when there's a fortification above your head. And the third item that factions are fighting over takes place at the Basilian Library there in Iskarion, and basically this is a fight between the Dornyar and the Teklandec. Now, the library itself had suffered a lot of damage due to Castle Iskar's rise, and the knowledge and history was now very vulnerable to looters and all kinds of things. The library is one of the crown jewels of Iskarion, and the legacy that is stored inside is the heart and legitimacy of the Seraphate. It's their history as a people. The destruction in the city debris as it was kind of crumbling around them damaged the library and disrupted the carefully crafted restraints that bound the great spell of the Custodian. Basically a sentient endless spell that managed the library, right? If you could summon an endless spell librarian, which would just be terrifying, it would be amazing. The magical fires that surrounded the building were now unchained and lashing out at basically everyone nearby. It's just magic and knowledge were running amok. Now, both the Dornyar and the Teklandec each consider the library to be of the utmost importance if they wish to secure the future of the Prime Dominion for themselves. Again, the Dornyar, for the most part, is knowledge is their power, and so that's absolutely what my satrap was looking for. The Dornyar sent in the Null Myriad Bone Reapers, who survived the magical flames, but not the masonry thrown at them by the living spell. Again, Null Myriad, really cool with magic, not so much with being crushed into powder. The Teklandec then approached the Dornyar, suggesting they'd hold the library jointly in the aftermath. They offered to help contain the Custodian in return. And when that happened, I love this, the Caradhran Theodra von Albern went in and out without much commotion and came back with the Custodian contained in a magic bottle. If you don't know, the Caradhran Overlords have an artifact that allows them to unleash an endless spell, and so this was her sucking it in. With the spell broken, that's when looters invaded the place. Several volumes from the library were pilfered by raiders during the aftermath, some of which Dornyar agents managed to stop before the material was totally lost forever. The Dornyar, specifically, now held the library and started reconstruction efforts, including a new memorial wing named for the Wergog prophet Socrates. And if you don't know, if you didn't catch it, Socrates was the Dornyar general who gave his life in the last charge against the Arinar in the battle for the Eye of Noctis. And so this is a little commemoration to a hero who we lost. So that is how kind of things panned out when it comes to the different factions trying to get the most important items that are representative of power for the Iskarneth in general. So with the exception of the first one with the banner, there was actually no blood shed. And that's actually a wonderful thing in terms of all the different coalitions having to come together and address a singular threat. Now, for the rest of this, we're going to be talking about the realm that's being torn asunder. These are the paths of story of how each coalition dealt with the fallout of Castle Iskar rising in their own lands during this season. And just to kind of give you a sense of how destabilizing this castle's appearance was and how much he's messing with the actual physical elements of the realm, he's making it rain rocks from the castle, the chains are wrecking the landscape, the Lux Umbra in the center has monsters being released all over the place, raiders are taking advantage of chaos, undead agents of Alti are attacking lands and undermining resistance, as well as the stream of refugees from Iskarian itself and other wrecked settlements that are all trying to run for safety. So we're just going to go through the different satrapies in order and just chat about, like, basically what was their reaction to all of this happening. And we'll start off with the Celandec. The Celandec started by mobilizing their agents, readying the land on the northern part of Amisra, I think is how I pronounce it, Amisra Island, where they were already had some good farmland, and there's like, we just need to keep this. Like, there's no way we can lose food for all these people. Many refugees that were severely wounded poured into these camps that were set up to kind of receive them, and it taxed the Celandec supplies. Again, when there's just so many people, how do you feed and clothe them all? Skaven raiders waylaid and dispersed the Celandec standing forces who had traveled further to deal with them. The refugee camps weren't able to defend themselves from the volume of Troggoths who had made Arasni their home since the last battle there against the Teklandec. The Celandec tried, but their forces were spread too thin, and they weren't able to protect everyone in their lands. So they had a really smart plan of, like, defend the farmland because we need to be able to feed everybody, but the need was just so huge, it's just real rough. Now for the Teklandec specifically suffered a lot from Castle Iskar's rising due to the shattering of the Wirinth landmass. I mean, it's literally a massive part of their geography. It's a whole island that makes up a good chunk of their property. Just kind of got unearthed and tilled and destroyed as this castle was lifting off from the ground. So they lost actual landmass. After clearing the land of escaped monsters from the Lux Umbra, several mercenaries managed to secure one of the largest and stable shard islands and establish homes for the refugees there, with the help of the Sylvaneth and Bone Reaper fortifications. This new island is called Wirith, meaning Little Weirneth. The Teklandec were successful in securing their lands and the refugees who came their way. It's because they acted fast, they looped in a new island and were like, this is this thing that we can protect, we need some stability, and they had the infrastructure and that kind of thing to help folks. Next we go to the Ruular. Now the Ruular immediately set to rebuild their land that was scoured by the dragging chains of Castle Iskar. They set out to build a highway road, connecting land masses, basically just trying to revitalize themselves by kind of getting their trade routes and everything back together. A lot of the debris from the castle that fell off during that initial move from where it came up out of the ground to Iskarian was actually just depositing these weird dormant eggs of some monsters and invertebrates from the Lux Umbra, which the Ruular put down very, very carefully. A grand plan was enacted throughout Ruular lands. The old misaligned Waystone Tower of Horith was put right, and in the island of Somina, which was recently taken from the Idrilik, a special Seraphon spawning pool was seeded to tap into the dormant realm gate there. By having the ley lines activated, another deep ritual in Loris, next to another dormant realm gate, conducted the geomantic energy there. These 3 points channeled a new realm gate into existence, connecting Suminia directly to Loris deep in Ruilar land, and to this new highway they were building. So that's a lot of explanation. What I'm really getting at is they came up with a plan to be able to move refugees and people across their country highly efficiently. That's the real crux of this. So refugees were quickly transported to safety, defenses were deployed very swiftly, stopping any threats of raiders and that kind of stuff. So the Ruilar rescue effort was a success, and they got that by focusing on the infrastructure of travel, which is a very powerful thing when it comes to this kind of level of warfare where armies have to move from point A to point B. Next up are the Idrilik. So several of the Idrilik forces were sent to aid the refugees, and instead decided to go straight to Iskarion to join the main fight. Which I totally understand, this is the most martial prowess focused of the satraps, but it just, at a certain point, you just gotta help the folks around you, and they decided instead to go to the fight directly. Now, the remaining Idrilik rescue forces were spread extremely thin. They were defending raiders, and even the Ruilar warbands looting supplies, but unable to secure the landmass itself effectively. The Idrilik lands suffered, and refugees heading there were left pretty much defenseless in the face of the monsters from Luxumbra and raiders. And so the Idrilik sort of failed at protecting those folks specifically. But keep in mind, it is really good to have somebody putting some kind of opposition to what Alti has going on in Iskarion. So just kind of keep that in mind. Now we come to the Dornyar. The Dornyar not only had a flood of refugees and raiders and monsters like everybody else did, but they were also suffering from a terrible drought, because if you remember, the Celandec conquered the island of Manuve and took the Aqua Guranus fount that used to feed the dry land in the Dornyar. And this is a fun little story. A bathhouse set up by the Daughters of Cain mercenaries was ordered to use their spring to provide drinking water as a stopgap measure, which is just, you know, drinking a lady's bathwater. That's next level stuff. A plan to erect an aqueduct to carry water from the nearby Caldera Lake was put into motion. Gargant manpower meant that this aqueduct was completed within a matter of weeks. They also had Sylvaneth mercenaries using their renewed irrigation abilities to regrow vegetation and crops. With good capacity supplies in Dornyar land, more refugees were now brought in from Iskarion, and the Dornyar succeeded in their rescue efforts. And lastly is the R&R. The R&R rebuilt a dilapidated town in the mountains of Kelendor to support the incoming refugees as a high-capacity settlement surrounded by terraced mountainside fields. These guys, they drafted plans and just went to it immediately. However, some of the mercenaries used their position to develop their own private ventures, and the Ruilar warriors they had just captured recently managed to escape in the disorganized logistics. With a Ruilar counterattack incoming on the previously secret town, the R&R had to abort the settlement development and relocate all refugees that they had already settled. This cost them an immense amount of time and resources, spreading their forces thin and making the rescue effort a failure. And so they essentially wanted to put all the people they were rescuing in a single point. That point got leaked, and now they had to disperse. Now at this point, at the end of turn 4, Alti essentially makes a speech. Now he doesn't have like speaker systems everywhere, but he essentially, from the top of Castle Iskar, whispers and like magic carries it to every corner of the Prime Dominion, and essentially he poses a threat, saying, "My plan is not over. This is the first step. There's a new world to come. I am going to be its leader. Some of your satraps might be on my side." Just kind of instill that little bit of doubt there, and essentially puts up that he's going to create a new Prime Dominion order. So at this point, everyone's back is against the wall. Whether or not you failed to secure refugees and that kind of thing, like, don't be discouraged if your particular satrap didn't do so hot for whatever reason. The truth is, everyone's back is against the wall, right? If you succeed at securing refugees, it still means everybody got punched in the face, and there's some people who are safe and some people aren't, so don't worry about it too much. And that is where I'm going to end this week's video. Next time, we'll be able to see some real resolution to this overall story. I could not be more excited to talk about it then. Thank you all so much for watching and listening, and I hope to catch you in my next Animosity Campaign video. Happy wargaming.